All right, new rule. If you have a superhero movie coming out anytime in the near future, no more press junkets. It never leads to anything good. I mean, do people even watch this stuff anymore? I feel like the only times you ever hear about press junket interviews from actors and creators is when people on social media clip out things out of context and use that to farm their own engagement. Like in this video here today. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another video with Swaggle Haas. And in this one, we need to talk about Anthony Mackie. What are you doing? What are you doing? Why are you talking about Captain America not being, somebody who actually likes the ideals of America anymore? At least that's kind of what you implied based on your statement, even though I don't actually think that's what you were trying to say. But in this video, I thought it'd be interesting to kind of dig into this, a little bit more of the cultural stuff as it relates to kind of comic books as well. It's kind of led to some interesting conversations on places like Reddit and articles online. Everybody is talking about this right now. And I feel like I had to commentate on it. I don't always like to get engaged into the cultural war stuff. I mean, generally speaking, I feel like it's a waste of time. I mean, the entire ecosystem of culture war and online and stuff is literally to just get people worked up. Like, you're being manipulated. That's what you are. Whether you agree with wokeness or you're anti-woke or whatever, you're leftist or rightist or whatever the case is, it's all just a game. It's all just a game on the internet. And it's not good. It's not good to spend all your energy arguing with people online and getting all worked up about people you don't even know, who don't even know you exist in a film. But with that being said, now I feel like I have to talk about this. You know why? Because it's gone over into my territory now. I see people online talking about my boy Captain America and mischaracterizing what he actually stands for. And so in this video, using the late great work of the legendary comic book creator Mark Gruenwald, I'm going to show you guys exactly what Captain America does stand for and why he does wear the red, white, and blue, and why Captain America is connected to America, which is not what Anthony Mackie had to say. But before I get into that, if you guys could like, comment, subscribe, I appreciate it. Help support the channel doing those things. But let us get into this video. Oh boy. If you guys don't know the context here, Anthony Mackie was being interviewed. Obviously, we have Captain America 4 coming out soon. And somebody had asked the question about, what he kind of thinks about the character and what the film represents. And he said some things that right now is a big talking point amongst all of the various publications. I mean, you can see how much coverage this is getting. I mean, Gizmodo, Hollywood Reporter, Forbes, New York Post. I think I saw, stuff on Variety and Deadline. Everybody is talking about this. And I think it's actually really interesting how the culture has totally shifted here where, I think, frankly, let's call it like it is. Now that Donald Trump has won, now it's become oh, okay, woke's no longer cool, guys. Let's not push this stuff. And let's really get into it for a second. Okay, guys, we're all adults here. Okay, we can all be measured about this. Do we really need to do the whole thing? Disney's dead because of wokeness and blah, blah, blah. I've talked about this before in a lot of ways. And I don't mean to tread on talking points I've done, but I feel like I have to add this to this context, to this video, so that we can move on with the conversation. But here's the deal, okay? Wokeness, Disney, all of that stuff, all of the video essays that are made about it these days. It's I think of those things as being directionally correct. And what I mean by directionally correct is yes, I generally think you're onto some semblance of a correct idea here, but it's completely overblown. As somebody who has worked in the studio system and has written scripts, in Hollywood and all this sort of stuff, at the end of the day, it's individual people making individual choices. Now, there are incentive structures that push people to make certain choices, but those incentive structures ultimately are created based on what those companies think is going to make them the most amount of money. And for a time, DEI was the thing that people thought was going to be the way that they would get the most audiences on board. That was the Overton window, right? Now, the pendulum has swung, and DEI is no longer cool, and now the incentive structure is going to change. The only thing that has ever mattered in this entire culture war process is not the color white, it's not the color black, it's the color green. Okay? That's all that matters. That's all that they want. That's all they care about. That's all the algo wants. That's all the companies want. They just want to make money. So they'll say whatever they need to say to get people on their side. All right, let's go back to now what Anthony Mackie had to say. In this article, I have this one pulled up, the Forbes one. Anthony Mackie's controversial Captain America quote mirrors Chris Evans' The Comics. See, I see articles like this, and I'm like, hey, no, you're just wrong here. This is not correct. But let's start here. This is what Anthony Mackie actually had to say. Captain America represents a lot of different things, and I don't think the term America should be one of those representations. It's about a man who keeps his word, who has honor, dignity, and integrity. I don't think the term America should be one of those representations. Listen, he's just wrong here, okay? Now, this is going to be like a real mincing of words and technicalities. And, in a lot of ways, the argument that we're having is sort of what America means. And, when you kind of go to like first principles, like if you are not aligned to, the ideas of America, then you're going to have a hard time, disagreeing with Anthony Mackie's statement right here. If you don't have those first principles or don't agree with those first principles of what America represents, then yeah, Captain America is just not going to be a character for you. But needless to say, he said that statement and then everyone got mad at him or became an outrage, so to speak. I mean, who knows if this is really that much of an outrage, but he would later post on his Instagram, I'm a proud American, and taking on the shield of a hero like Cap is an honor of a lifetime. I have the utmost respect for those who serve and have served our country. Cap has universal characteristics that people all over the world can relate to. Now, I want to extend him an olive branch because this is a press junket he's doing like overseas in like an international audience. So maybe he's sort of thinking to himself like, well, I don't want to like talk about American values because like I'm trying to sell it to like the European audience right here. And so like, let's kind of make this more of a universal thing because it's a bigger market. And I mean, frankly, this is like something that a lot of companies always have to think about and worry about. Like, you don't want to have too much of a Western lens if you're trying to sell it, to like an Eastern audience and things of that nature. So I'm a little forgiving of that, but obviously he could have answered this in a much better way. But to me, what's really interesting is all the conversation that is now kind of existing online. Like even this article right here is trying to make excuses saying like, oh, Captain America, his quote mirrors that of Chris Evans and the comic books. But at the end of the day, it depends on what comic book you're actually talking about. But let's talk about what Chris Evans had to say. This is from his interview in 2011. He said this, well, to me, I'm not trying to get too lost in the American side of it. This isn't a flag-waving movie. It is red, white, and blue, but it just so happens that the character was created in America during wartime when there was a common enemy, even though it is Captain America. I've said before in interviews, it feels more like he should just be called Captain Good. Laughs. He was created at a time when there was undeniable evil, and this guy was kind of created to fight that evil. I think that everyone could agree the Nazis were bad, and Cap, just so happens to wear the red, white, and blue. So this is something I find very interesting. This is a quote from Chris Evans that he said in 2011 when he was first cast as Captain America. And a lot of people are pointing to that quote and saying, well, he said that and he never got fried for it. To which I would say, yeah, because that was 2011. That was like not a political climate where when people say stuff, it gets like swept up into the social media algorithm machine. Like we live in a different world now. Had he said that today, people would absolutely tear him apart for that. And I actually disagree with what he had to say. That's actually not what Captain America was defined as in the comics, at least based on what Mark Gruenwald had to say. Now, lastly, before I go over to that, the last thing that this article is trying to bring up is this quote from the comic books right here. But I'm actually going to jump over to this Reddit thread to highlight that quote because this is, I think, where the conversation gets interesting. So I saw this Reddit thread where people say, are people seriously offended by this? I'm sorry, but I'm with Mackie on this one. Captain America in the comics have several times gone against his own country and even ditched the title of America. What part of Captain America's character do you really think represents America? Does he wipe out civilizations? Does he keep slaves for hundreds of years? Does he nuke countries twice? Does he dismantle a continent for decades? Does he shoot up schools? Did he beat minorities? Does he send $50 billion to Israel when aliens invade? What part of America is so great that a character like Steve Rogers represent it? Steve represented what America should be, but never was and never will be. That's what Mackie is saying here. America has never been what it pretends to be in the media. Soulja Boy and Homelander are the most accurate representations of the real America. Okay. First of all, that was really difficult to read because the spelling was wild in that, and the sentence structure caused my brain to hurt. But I completely disagree. First of all, one, you answered your own question. Does America do all these things? No, that's not what Steve Rogers represents. Like, that's not what Captain America represents. You said it here yourself. Steve represented what America should be. Now, I disagree with when you say, but never was and never will be. Completely disagree with that. And I'm going to answer that question once we go to the comic books. That's what Mackie is saying here. I think that that's probably a pretty charitable definition of what Mackie is trying to say. I mean, maybe that's what he's trying to say. But based on what he said, if I'm going to take his sentence at literal face value, that is not what he said. Because he is taking out the American part of it. And the American part of it, again, based on first principles, the American dream, the ideals of America, is key to the belief of the Captain America character. This is a thread that has been upvoted 2.1 thousand times. A lot of people feel this way. I mean, this is the political climate we're in. I get it. There's a lot of cynicism. A user said, well, I say America is nothing. Without its ideals, its commitment to the freedom of all men, America is a piece of trash. A nation is nothing. A flag is a piece of cloth. Steve Rogers in the comics. First of all, that's a comic book taken from a what if issue. Like, this person in this Forbes article also quoted it, you know, that one section. That was like from a what if issue where it's like, what if Steve Rogers was never thawed out of the ice and like dropped off into the modern times or something like that. So like, that's just not canon, you know? And being that it's a what if issue, it's trying to subvert the character in and of itself, you know? So that I think that's interesting that, you know, people are now throwing this around as like, oh, see, this is what, you know, he had to, this is what Captain America says. So Anthony Mackie is right. And it's like, guys, we can't do this, okay? This we're just taking all this stuff, throwing it out there, and it's just, I don't know, it's not true. This is why I had to make this video. All right, let's talk about Captain America for real now, comic book collectors. I point to this, Captain America, number 323, from 1986, the series written by Mark Gruenwald, one of my absolute favorite single-issue Captain America comics ever written. Because I feel like this issue perfectly represents who Captain America is. And I find that this entire story arc that Mark Gruenwald did is especially relevant to everything kind of going on with this current Captain America movie, because this effectively is a storyline that was pulled from to tell the Falcon and Winter Soldier TV show, which was the U.S. agent storyline where Captain America went away. He created the U.S. agent character and John Walker came in. And a lot of these ideals and notions that the show was trying to bring up were actually addressed in this entire comic storyline. And I want to show you a few of these pages to kind of give you guys an idea of how I think Captain America should be represented and what he stands for. I take this particular page, number 4 from this issue. Little side note, I do subscribe to Marvel Unlimited, but God, Marvel Unlimited, please, can you guys please fix your desktop client so I can actually like use you guys in videos here? It's so hard that I have to use this other kind of website. But let's read this together so we can understand who Captain America is. For context, Captain America is chasing the Flag Smasher. Remember, we got Flag Smasher in the Falcon and Winter Soldier TV show. Flag Smasher is somebody that is I guess you would call him a globalist, you know, that doesn't want any borders and things of that nature, which again, 1986, I mean, way ahead of its time, you know, talking about all of these kinds of issues. But this is what Steve Rogers had to say in this issue. Ultimatum's goal is to unite mankind by abolishing the concept of nationalism, which they feel gives people a sense of separateness and superiority over others. To achieve this end, they launch terrorist attacks against symbols of nationalism. These attacks may not cause a single nation to weaken, but they sure do capture the media's attention. You might guess that that as a living symbol of America, I make an irresistible target for these people. Keep shooting, we are many. He's just one man. That's right. I'm just one man who's dedicated his life to the ideals of freedom, justice, and equality. Some folks misunderstand me. They think I represent the American government, its political system, or its official policies. I don't. Captain America, what part of Captain America do you think really represents? Does he wipe out civilization? Does he keep slaves of 100 years? Does he nuke countries? No, he doesn't. He said it right here. He doesn't represent the government. I represent the American dream, the notion that human beings should have the opportunity to better their lives and attain their noblest aspirations. Being Captain America is the fulfillment of my American dream. No one forced me to take the name or represent the ideals. I choose to. The responsibility has weighed heavy on me at times, but I do my best. I try to set good example. I try to fight the good fight. If Ultimatum had peacefully promoted their anti-nationalist philosophy, I would have defended their right to express their point of view. But instead, they coerced people to listen to them and placed the lives of the innocents in jeopardy. That was the first thing that made me mad. Very interesting. So he goes on to fight Ultimatum and the Flag Smasher. And he actually gets to the point where he knocks out Flag Smasher and they get stranded in the snow. And I feel like this is just very true of his character. He rescues Flag Smasher's body right here, and then he thinks that he's going to get hypothermia and freeze. So Captain America brings him into a cave right here, and he tries to keep him warm as they wait out a snowstorm. And then he's actually, still passed out. And Captain America, with his enemy, puts him in a blanket and actually hugs him to keep him warm. Like, that's the kind of person that he actually is right there. They then go on to have this conversation. Like it or not, you're going to listen to me, Flag Smasher. I want to address some false notions I think you have of me. First of all, I'm not a knee-jerk patriot. I don't believe in my country, right or wrong. I support America in its concept, its essence, its ideal, its political system, its foreign and domestic policies, its vast book of laws. I am not America's official advocate of any of that. What I represent are the principles that America's politics, laws, and policies are based upon: freedom, justice, equality, opportunity. Flag Smasher responds with, then why alienate the rest of the world with America in your name? Why don't you call yourself Captain Freedom, Captain Justice, or... And then Captain America interrupts, I'd be glad to answer that for you right now, but I think I hear something. Yes, I see an aircraft, a copter. So we kind of table that talking point. And then, this is issue 322, and we go on to the entire story arc, leading all the way up to issue 350. You guys remember this cover right here, where he finally confronts U.S. Agent. I mean, that's the early stages of it. We go through this entire story with John Walker and him, putting the shield down and all of that whole thing. And we get to, this final revelation where we have this court hearing. Steve Rogers, mind you, is in the U.S. agent suit right here. And, the government basically apologizes to him after they find out that Red Skull was undercover and all that stuff. And then John Walker's like, you got to take up the mantle again. And Steve Rogers basically comes to that conclusion that, he doesn't need to take up the mantle, but he proudly will, because this is him answering the question ultimately with Flag Smasher, which is effectively to say that whether or not you think that the American dream does or doesn't exist, that idea that once did exist completely influenced his entire character. Steve Rogers' entire being is influenced by American dream. Now, you can say that the American dream is stupid, it's false, it doesn't exist, but it doesn't matter. That was his, first kind of worldview that influenced him. So wherever that came from, he's loyal to that. And for that, he will always be grateful to America, and he will always proudly wear that outfit. And I think that that's great. I think that that's, totally an optimistic way of looking at it. I love the austerity in how Steve Rogers sort of sees the world. And that's why I think a lot of people, are just maybe disappointed when they kind of hear a lot of these quotes. And that's kind of where I feel like, I'm sort of disappointed when I see a lot of the conversation online of people, saying oh, that's not what Steve Rogers said. He actually said this. He actually said this. And to me, it's I don't know. I feel like if you don't agree with that perspective, if you don't think that that's the character of Steve Rogers, I mean, I'll come out and say it. I don't think you should be writing Captain America. I don't think you should be working on the Captain America film. That's truly how I feel about it. All right, now that we got that out of the way, let's talk about the Captain America movie and some of the comic books related to it. Frankly, the Captain America movie right now is not tracking to do very well. Now, I personally am looking forward to watching it. I'm rooting for it. I don't know. I don't know how many people are going to comment on this thing that's oh, swag, you hate Captain America or whatever. I'm racist and stuff like that. I don't know. I'm just trying to show you guys my perspective, and I don't have a horse in the race. I just want to watch a good movie. That's how I feel. I'm excited to see it. I hope it's really good, but it's not looking like it's going to do very well. And frankly, I feel like this was always going to be an uphill battle, and it has nothing to do with specifically turning over the character to Anthony Mackie or Sam Wilson's Captain America. Frankly, it almost doesn't matter who you have in this case. it just is probably not going to have a great box office because we're talking about a character, Sam Wilson, that just frankly isn't all that popular. And you want to know how I know this? Look at the comic books. When has Sam Wilson ever been able to sustain an ongoing series? Listen, you have a 60-year history of comic book sales, and you can just see who the popular characters are. Like, the proof is in the pudding. You know, it's like Superman, Batman, Spider-Man. Those are like the most popular characters. So the chances that their movie does very well is going to be a lot higher than when you start to do movies like in the C tier and the D tier range. You know, once you start to have Sam Wilson Captain America movie, once you start to have, you know, Ant-Man #3, like, you know what I mean? Like, even Ant-Man is a hard character to get over the general audience hump. Like, it's kind of a miracle that his movies did as okay as they did, which frankly, even if you go back to Ant-Man #1 and #2, they still didn't do that good relative to the other characters, you know, like they were profitable, and certainly Ant-Man 3 had the hardest time, you know, generating a return. But even that character, it's like that character is just better off sort of in a ensemble Avengers film. That's just the reality of it. And also, can I just address another point while we're already having this conversation? I am so sick and tired of the people that say, like, you know, would respond to that and say, like, oh, but what about Iron Man? Iron Man was a C-list character, and look what Robert Downey Jr. did for that character. And it's like, okay, yeah, he was a C-list character, yes, kind of, but like at the same time, Iron Man, since 1968, has been able to command his own solo series. He's had cartoons of him in the past, albeit not that successful, but this is a character that has shown some proof to Marvel that he can draw, that he can sell. He has comic books. He's got an Iron Man title. Has there been a consistent, ongoing Nova title? No. Has there been a consistent, ongoing Falcon title? No, there hasn't been. Frankly, has there been a consistent, ongoing Bucky title? No, there hasn't been either. If Bucky were the one to take up the Captain America mantle and was about to come out, you know, as the star of this current movie, it would probably not be tracking very well either. All you have to do is look to the history of the comic book sales, and you can just tell. You can just know, like, who are the popular characters. And the more Disney sticks to that, the more they're likely going to be successful. And, you know, frankly, I know what you guys are thinking, Guardians of the Galaxy, these types of characters. Yeah, great. James Gunn hit a grand slam, you know, but it's not a formula that you want to like often repeat or try to continue to go to. Like it's not always going to work out, you know, and I think we've seen that with, you know, recent films. But going back to the comics here, Captain America 25, this is definitely one that, man, some of the sales for this, when you think back to the height of 2021 and even in 2019, I mean, look at some of the 9/8 sales for $200, dipping all the way down right now to $40 on the low. I mean, this is one of the examples of a book that sells for less today than it even did back in pre-comic book boom of 2020 and 2019. It's pretty crazy to see that. Captain America 117, another one here that, you know, let's go over to the 7.0 because I feel like 7.0 is kind of a good pace car grade to look at for the values of this thing. Even a book like this, it's like, look at how flat it was for many, many years, you know, and that is not going against the rate of inflation. I mean, it's technically going down, even though it looks flat. Got a little elevated in 2019 and 2020, obviously 2021, and now where it sells, most recent sale, $290, $300, compared to 2019, $317, $305. Basically around the same, if not even a little bit less, towards the end of the year. And that's kind of a book that, like, I don't know. This is going to be a hard one to ever really, you know, bounce back in a significant way, at least in kind of the mid-grain range. You know, as more books continue to come to the census and we're at the height, in theory, of that character's cultural significance. So that one's going to be a tough one. Maybe if Falcon came to Marvel Rivals, that would help. Hulk #1, probably the most impressive one out of all of the books related to this movie, still doing really well. I mean, recent sales, 230, 245, 325, 256. That's not bad, considering that this book was less than that in 2020. So one of the rare kind of modern books that, while it did have a correction and a pullback, has been able to sustain over the course of the last year or two, even though a lot of comic book prices have not been able to do the same. Anyways, that's all for this video. That was me going over the Anthony Mackie comment controversy. I don't know. I thought that this one was interesting to talk about. Again, I'm not really like too political on this channel here. I have my own opinions and things like that, like I shared in this video, but I think a lot of it is ultimately noise. but I thought this one was particularly interesting because it kind of called into question the actual definition of the character from the comic books. And in my opinion, I think Mark Gruenwald's version of the Captain America character is the most canon in my mind. And I kind of feel like if you're a creative working on Captain America IP, no matter the medium, comics, movies, cartoons, whatever the case may be, if you don't sort of subscribe to that Gruenwald perspective, I don't know if I really want to read your take on Steve Rogers. Anyways, that's all for this video. We were talking about Sam Wilson, though. Maybe Sam Wilson feels exactly how Anthony Mackie said. And in that case, maybe this entire video is for naught because Sam Wilson Captain America is different than Steve Rogers Captain America. Maybe that's what the movie will be about. Either way, I'm excited to watch it. Anyways, that's all for this video. Let me know what you guys think about this whole ordeal. Thanks so much for watching. Like, comment, subscribe. See you on the next video.